We've got the Good Brothers on the show this week. Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson. I'll too sweet that. Too sweet me, brother. But WWE brought them in 2016, I think it was. They came across with AJ and Nakamura from New Japan after the Wrestle Kingdom show. And I think as fans, we all sort of looked at the landscape and was like, wow, they've got Gallows and Anderson, they've got AJ Styles, and they've got Balor. Like they've got two former Bullet Club leaders and sort of like these stalwarts of this very, very popular group that people, not maybe the mainstream audience know, but like the hardcore fans are, they've done they did do some meetings on the show that they get pops, but it never. Why didn't they do it?
I don't know what you're talking about. They did the original club, the OC. What's wrong with you, Luke? Don't you watch
the only
wrestling?
Club that matters?
California. So there was a big New Japan heist of 2016 where they ran in, put Nakamura, AJ Styles, and Gallows and Anderson in the bag and ran off with it over their shoulder.
Rocky Rivera chasing it after being like, bring him back.
And then we kept expecting it to happen, and they sort of just kept flirting with the idea but never pulling the trigger. So you had that wonder. So obviously, like, AJ Styles turned heel. They did the whole beat up John Cena thing, and it was him and Gallows and Anderson. They were like, oh cool, it's Bullet Club, sort of. It's the club. All right, sort of. But they never did any Bullet Club things, mostly because they're all gaijins in WWE. And then they had that wonderful little moment with SummerSlam, where they met Finn Balor backstage, and AJ Styles was hanging with his new friends when the original friend came back in, the one that kind of was slightly older, so he went to college while leaving the other kids behind, and then he sort of came back and they kind of made new friends, and it's all heartbreaking. Well, the thing is, like, what is Bullet Club? What could Bullet Club be in WWE? Because the thing is, Bullet Club were like this anarchic force that didn't do things the New Japan way. They got over so much by doing stuff like foreign objects, interference, in an incredibly honorable, very sports-based promotion. And I don't know really what Bullet Club, what identity it would have in WWE, which I think is why they didn't do it, because ultimately all there is just the members and the name. That's the only kind of thing that they would have in WWE. They would have to come up with a completely new ethos, maybe something like throwing cinder blocks through glass windows or something like that.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like Retribution, there's this new group that we've got in WWE. That I'm kind of gutted aren't called Just Us, because that was one of the trademark names.
Just Us.
Proper reminds me of the Union, like that very, very short-lived faction of Big Show and Ken Shamrock and stuff. It's like, we're the Union.
Is that what is it like? Is that the one that the acronym was something up yours, Shane, or the United people who are
you ought to know, or something like that. I can't remember what it was now. Anyway, it was very daft. But I think for me, with Bullet Club, it was sort of, as a fan, I think I just wanted the four of them together to be like this. I love a faction. I'm a big fan of a faction. I didn't need, and I didn't particularly want them to just do a retread of Bullet Club. I didn't need them to be like, this is literally the exact same group, because they did that with the NWO, and it didn't work. Hey, look, we brought the NWO in. They're going to do all the things that they did. Oh yeah, but it's it's 5 years later, and we've all sort of moved on a little bit. And I think that if they'd have just done carbon copy Bullet Club, it would have been pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
But the four of them together as a dominating faction that, won titles and got into major feuds and stuff, and you had to build to Survivor Series matches and things like that, I think could have been really, really good. And I think it's WWE have always struggled to kind of bring in those really, really hardcore fans that love New Japan and love the indie stuff to kind of to watch their weekly show, and that might have been a way to kind of bring those in and say like, look, and you like that, here's also Roman Reigns, you like him as well, yeah.
It's tricky, like, because they do have the evolution blueprint. You know, you've got the older, more kind of senior guy in AJ Styles, then you've got this kind of hot young prospect who's definitely going to be kind of world champion material in Finn Balor. You've got the kind of the IC champion in there in Machine Gun Carl Anderson. Then you've got the heavy in the form of Luke Gallows. I just think they were at a point where, like, if they did throw everyone together and do a Bullet Club thing, then you are sort of stoking the fires of kind of New Japan. And I think at some point, like, you give Bullet Club in New Japan something to kind of play with and a way to kind of grab the headlines around that. But then they sort of did that by calling them the Club. And it's like, what's the point? Just like go all in. I think like was the big misstep, because obviously they did the Club. They were just a generic bunch of, assholes who were just like, yeah, they were just sort of like bullies, right? That's kind of they were cheeky scamps. Like a bit different from the kind of guerrilla warfare tactics of the Bullet Club. Like, was the only thing just not adding Finn Balor? Like, was that the kind of the last? Would it have kind of added that last little?
I mean, it would have been something interesting for Finn, whose like main roster run was essentially like that's all his main roster run was. He got injured, and then they were like, "Yeah, we're done with you. Actually, you're a bit rubbish. You're a demon." Sometimes feud with Baron Corbin.
Oh, but a tag team comprised of AJ Styles and Finn Balor, like the two leaders, the two main leaders of Bullet Club. No shade to Cody or Kenny, but like the two, the first two leaders, and like them having that kind of Rock Farouk kind of like contentious, like, our history all the way back to New Japan. Like it almost would have been better, sort of like the microcosm of just those two. And, and you might have kind of lost Anderson and Gallows. They might have just been sort of the henchmen for either one of those. Although you could argue that was something of how it went in the original Bullet Club. But no, I think you're right. I think there was a lot of meat on the bones, which they just kind of left to rot rather than kind of feast on.